Welcome to the Crack The MBA Show. My name is Nupur Gupta and I'm your host for today. Our guest today is Vibhu Kumar, who is a part of the MBA class of 2023 at Yale School of Management. Vibhu, you can wave hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah,
So nice to
and
be here. Yeah.
yeah, it's such a pleasure, Vibhu. And I'd love to introduce you before we get into the Q&A. Prior to Yale, Vibhu worked with Schlumberger for 4 years on areas like data analytics, product development, and engineering. Vibhu is a graduate of IIT Kharagpur with a major in exploration in geophysics, integrated MSc. Vibhu wears many hats in college. He has been involved in music team as a vocalist, in a non-profit with media and PR, and also leading NCC, which is the National Cadets in India. He holds a Dean's Scholarship at Yale, is co-president of the Data Analytics Club, communications lead for the Business and Environmental Club, and also part of the Capella group, which is called Economies of Scale, which Vibhu will be co-leading in the second year. Honestly, I have no idea how Vibhu finds all this time. And currently,
That is so
currently,
kind of
Currently, Vibhu is interning with Snap, which of course we want to hear a lot about as well. Here's Vibhu for our audience, wearing multiple hats. Vibhu, thank you so much for joining us on the show amid all the things that you're managing.
No, thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's been a great experience and I would love to talk more about it.
Amazing. Thanks. Thank you, Vibhu. Vibhu, just to begin, if you can talk a little bit about before you got started at Yale, why did you want an MBA and why Yale?
Sure. So the point where I started thinking about an MBA was I was a couple of years into my job. So as you mentioned, I was working at Schlumberger in oil and gas, which was a pretty it's a world in itself where you're like dealing with the industry, like specific things about the industry and a lot of technicalities all the time. But at the same time, I realized that I was kind of out of sync with the rest of the world in a way because we were not interacting as much with other industries. And I was diving more and more into the tech space within oil and gas. And I understood and I realized that a couple of things that I wanted to step out and get a better dive into the tech industry and kind of get a sense of what's really happening in the world. And I also realized that I wanted to move from being a very technical person towards having a more strategic and leadership oriented view in my work. And so I realized at one point that it probably is a good idea for me to get an MBA, have that pivot both in terms of the kind of work that I'm doing as well as the kind of industries I'm working on. And so I was, of course, yeah, there were multiple schools I was considering, and where Yale kind of stood out was first of all a lot of alignment with the kind of mission that I had. So eventually, what I really want to do, as I was already working in energy, and that was a space that I still am pretty connected to. I do want to bring these tech experiences back to the oil and gas and to the energy industry in general, because this is kind of something that the industry needs in the near future, because there's going to be a lot of disruption over the next couple of decades. We're already seeing so much about climate change and the energy transition and countries who need more and more energy as they develop. That is a goal that I still want to pursue. And I realized that SOM is a place that highlights qualities that are in line with what I'm looking for. And on a whole, it's a very kind-hearted school, I would say. It's just a place where I think I got that sense even early on when I was applying, that this is a place, the mission is educating leaders for business and society. So there was an emphasis on, having a balance between doing good business and doing something that benefits society as a whole. And I'm glad to say that I realized that once I actually came to Yale, it was not an understatement. So definitely it's something that the school really values and really cares about. That was kind of initially what made me think about it as a valuable option. And once I was here, I think I completely was so happy that I chose to apply. Often SOM does not immediately come on people's radars. It's very known for being a non-profit school. Of course, our class has a lot of people who've come from government and non-profit jobs. But that actually, in fact, adds a lot of diversity because you get to meet people who have done this very, very different work from you. And so you have a mix of people who are coming from, consulting, finance, business backgrounds, engineering, and other things. And along with that, you have people coming from, who've been volunteering for years, who have been working in government service, and so on. So it's quite a mix. And when you really get into class to discuss business and how businesses operate, that brings a lot of perspectives in. And I think this is something that SOM has done very well. As I finally made my way here, I think I realized that this decision was really a really good one to make for me.
Very exciting. Thank you for sharing that, Vibhu. We have a phrase for us, Yale SOM, the school with the kind heart.
Yeah, I did find that true for sure.
Okay, that's really helpful, I'm sure, for prospects. Before we get right into Yale, your experiences here, can you tell us a little bit about your admissions process? What worked
Mhm.
for you, what you could have done better, and what advice you have for prospective applicants?
Sure. I was applying in the year 2020 where things were already very disrupted by COVID, and we were all trying to figure out how to really manage things and during the pandemic. And with that, the applications were a whole different thing altogether. For giving the GMAT, I had a huge disruption because I was planning to give the GMAT in April 2020 and then the world changed. So I had to wait till August to do that. So, and give the GMAT from home. So again, that was something that was quite disruptive. But at the same time, I think the pandemic gave me some time to study so that I could do better on that exam. And then coming to the applications, I spent a lot of time reflecting on about what I was doing till now. And I think one of the big challenges that I'm sure you saw that as well was to overcome, like, as I mentioned, I was working in oil and gas for so long that I had this very specific vocabulary and very specific way in which I talked about my work and thought about my work, which I had to kind of begin to translate for a more general audience. And I think this is a takeaway from it, that the application process is in itself a preparation for business school, because that was a process you need to go through before you come here, so that you're ready from the get-go to talk about yourself and share your story with everyone. Spent a lot of time writing the essays, my recommendations with my manager and mentor, and then a lot of time was spent researching the schools and trying to understand a different fit that every school has. So one thing in terms of talking about my experience and the takeaways on the side is, first of all, I think something is very important to research your schools very well and definitely talk to the people who are already there. Because as I was talking about Yale, there's so many specific things that are, culturally very important for the school. I believe that every school has that. And I think that I realize that more and more during my internship right now, because I'm meeting people from other business schools and everyone has a separate identity. So it's hard to just gauge that identity from just the school's website or just like the bigger events. It is, I think, important to reach out to people individually, try to have some conversations. And the students are always very excited to talk to prospective students, talk about their experience all the time. So I'm sure if you can reach out to them, if you know somebody, that's great. If you can reach out to them on LinkedIn, I think I'm sure most of them will like respond to you as soon as possible and give their time and energy to really talk to you and help you understand what would be a good choice. Thinking about other things in the application, as I'm giving this advice, this is something I wish I would have done even more, spending more time talking to even more people. I think the pandemic in itself was a challenge, because usually you have like a lot of events, even in-person events where you can meet alumni, like in normal times. But with the pandemic, with everything being virtual, and people who were still in school were figuring out how to do classes, people who were working were still managing work from home, and it was a different time. But I'm sure now, I think it's much easier to reach out. People are more used to reaching out, even remotely, and you can even try to meet people in person for sure. So I think networking and just getting to know the school is the best thing you can do, because then you can, first of all, make a good decision about what school you want to go to, and then also think about how your story aligns with what the school represents.
Thanks for sharing that, Vibhu. There's something you said which I would love to talk just a little bit more. You talked about a unique identity which each school has, and something you can see through your internship as well. So, what for you is the unique identity that Yale SOM has and the students have? I know you talked about kind-hearted. That's really helpful. That's not something that we typically come across. So, what would be those two or three things that you would really want to highlight?
Sure. I think to pick three things I would want to highlight, I think first of all, definitely, a double emphasis on kind-hearted, because it seems like it's a very generic quality, but I at the same time, like when I'm with my classmates and when I'm in class, there's an environment of mutual respect and a lot of diversity in terms of where people are coming from and how they treat each other. So what kind-heartedness means is that people are not competitive at all. I mean, even through recruiting and the entire first year, we were never competing with each other and trying to compare ourselves with each other. It was more about
Can
how
you
do we
give
work.
one personal example that you've experienced of the kind-heartedness?
I think like one good example of this kind-heartedness and collaboration would be the recruiting process itself. So while I was recruiting, I was on a case team with five other people. And usually you would think about a case team where you are like competing for a few spots and like select interviews. You would think that people are gonna compare
What do you
themselves to each
mean?
other.
What do you mean by a case team for our
Oh,
listeners?
sure, yeah. So basically, for both consulting and tech recruiting, you have case interviews where you are given a business case, where you're given a situation about, like a business is facing a particular challenge. So how would you approach solving it? So you need to present a structured solution, and in the end, you need to like give a solid recommendation about how the company should go forward in implementing a solution. Just to share the experience, so we were like this group of 5 or 6 people who generally worked with each other to practice preparing for case interviews. And instead of being very competitive and thinking about how is this person doing better than me, we instead became such a great close knit group of friends that even though we were like we never knew each other before we got into this team. But then we like even after recruiting was done, we would always go for a dinner almost every week. We played squash together, and throughout recruiting, the timelines are different for everybody. Somebody gets through first, somebody gets through later, but we never stopped supporting each other throughout that process because we're always looking out for each other. If one person was done recruiting, they would help the other person out immediately. And I think that kind of pervades throughout all the activities that we do. So it's something that it's impressive that how you bring 350 people in who are like new to each other, and then they have this sense of compassion towards each other, which is it's just something that's amazing about the
Okay, great. So that's kind-hearted. That's one.
yeah,
And
that's one. Yeah,
yeah, so the other
yeah.
two.
Sure. So the other two are, I think, the second one would be the connection with the whole university, like Yale SOM's connection with the university. A lot of schools say that you can take courses in other graduate schools or other departments of the university, but Yale SOM really actively promotes that, and they made it really easy for us to to study, let's say, in the School of Environment, in the School of Law, or
Have you taken advantage of that personally?
not yet, but I do plan to in my second year because I'm going to have more electives in the second year. So I'm going to take courses in the law school and the School of the Environment for sure. And I'm also planning to take one course in the CS department. But this is something that is routine. Like everybody, like almost everybody takes courses definitely outside
And is there
SOM,
a
and
limit to the number of courses you can take?
not really, no. So it's
Oh, okay,
effectively
so you
not no
can
limit.
take so you can take multiple courses, like every
Yeah.
semester you can
Every
take courses.
semester, every half semester, in fact, you can half semester and semester you can take courses outside. There are also people who are doing a lot of like joint degrees. Like for example, as Yale has a joint program where you can do a master's in environment studies at the Yale School of Environment and do an MBA at SOM. So these people also act as a great interface so that you can get to know the other schools, and then you can go ahead and take courses there and really broaden your perspectives, interact with more people in the university. So I think SOM is really closely bonded with the whole all of Yale in general, and I think that's something that shows up not just in academics, but like even in other events. We meet other graduate students a lot all the time. For example, culturally, the South Asia, we have a South Asia club in SOM, but at the same time there is a South Asian Graduate Association for all of Yale, and it's almost equally as active. And we kind of split our time between like being just SOM and meeting with other people from South Asia across Yale. So I think that bonding is definitely something that's really strong. To talk about the third thing, it would be just the conversation around society is something that's really emphasized upon both by the school itself, like by the faculty and by the administration and the students among themselves as well. Amongst all our classes, the conversation is never really solely business centric. Whenever we're talking about whether it's the cases that we are studying in class, whether it's the discussions that we're having among ourselves, whether it's what our professors and faculty are working on, there's always an emphasis of thinking about what is the social impact of what we're doing. And I think that making that such a big part of the conversation, especially in today's time, is something that really makes SOM special in a different way. And I think it kind of you bring kind-hearted people to have this discussion, then you find people who are really willing to take an extra step. Like even after they're out of business school, it's not about just working in a job where you are like working, let's say, with a nonprofit or volunteering after business school or something like that, for which of course SOM provides a lot of support. But at the same time, it creates a sense of consciousness, even for if you're like, you're doing you're becoming a consultant or a product manager, you would still have this sense of, what the impact of your work on society. You will always keep thinking about that. And that is something that I think SOM does a great job at inculcating among all its students.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, so Vibhu, just getting a little bit more into some specifics, something that we read a lot about, even if we visit the website or attend events, it would be the raw case approach and the integrated curriculum. That comes up a
Mhm.
lot, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, can you explain to a layperson what that means for you as a student? Like, the more real you could make it, I think that'd be really helpful, because when we read it as concepts, it's one thing.
I know. Yeah, that was something that I think my understanding also changed like before and after being at SOM. So no, I think both of them are like really interesting approaches as to how SOM deals with specifically the core curriculum. So instead of having like, first I'll talk about the integrated curriculum, which is basically, instead of usually you would open up an MBA curriculum and you'd see there's a course on finance, there's a course on marketing, there's a course on leadership. So you have these different subjects siloed into different courses. But for us, we have something called the integrated curriculum, which basically, instead of having courses by these topics, we have courses by stakeholder perspectives. And what I mean by that is, like, a business exists and there are a lot of people who interact with the business. So we're going to have a course related to each one of them separately. So that means we have a course which is called customer, which is basically just focusing about how a business appears from the perspective of a customer. And when you talk about that, then we talk about customer centric businesses, we talk about marketing, we talk about like organizational behavior. How do you shape an organization so that it works, it communicates with the customer better? We talk about brand strategy. So it becomes marketing and organizational behavior in one. It's not going to be two different silos where you have two different classrooms where that discussion's happening. Similarly, we have courses called competitor, we have investor, we have state and society, we have the executive. So all of these are basically courses where you are taking a particular perspective instead of a particular subject. And then you're trying to explore how a business works specifically from an individual perspective. And I think that helps you get a really mixed interdisciplinary approach where you're going to sit in one class and you're going to discuss finance and marketing and competitive strategy in one class. So it's not going to be siloed into different things. It's going to be, a combined discussion, which is actually how, how businesses work in real life. So I think that's something that the curriculum does really well. The raw case approach, on the other hand, is something that's pretty unique to Yale as well. It's so usually just for context, usually like a lot of business schools teach the case method is something that is very common across many business schools, where you are kind of going through an entire business case that is a story about something that a business is facing and how they are thinking about solving that challenge, and what are the current situation, what's the current situation in which the business is operating. And how the raw case differs is, instead of, usually like cases are like a document where like you read a 15-page document which narrates a whole story, and then you have a discussion over that story. But the raw case instead will bombard you with 15 news articles, 20 news reports, 15 interviews. And you have to, from that, kind of bring together a story and think about what's the right decision to be made. So it's kind of like real life. Like if somebody tells you that, for example, I don't know, like if I'm interning at Snapchat is facing a problem in, let's say, North America. So no one's going to give you a 15-page document about, how Snapchat works. You got to, go on the internet, Google recent news articles, then you've got to talk to the leaders, you've got to interview like them individually. And this is the kind of process that they seek to replicate in the raw case method. I would say it takes more effort for sure. Whenever we had a raw case come up, we're like, okay, this is going to take a while. So we just sit through and read through a lot of things. But at the same time, I think it helps you in a couple of ways. First of all, it helps you synthesize information from multiple sources and bring it together, and like gives you practice in making that more cohesive. And it also helps you learn to prioritize, because there's going to be a lot of information in most of those cases, and you don't have to go through everything to actually come to a decision. So you'll have to, like, based on what your goal is, you have to prioritize, okay, this is what I'm going to read. This is what I'm going to just skim through or just skip for now. but if I need it, I know where it is. So I think that is something that the raw case method kind of emphasizes about in terms of making a case be more realistic, like more closer to what you would experience in the real world.
Very cool. And are you doing a lot of these raw cases through the first year?
I would say, yeah. I think it's a 50-50 mix between like standard and like the regular cases and raw cases. It's a 50-50 split.
Oh, okay,
Almost
got it.
every course will have at least 2 or 3.
Okay, got it, got it. And now that you've done both, right, the regular cases as well as the raw cases, do you think the difference in learning is significant?
Yeah, although that difference comes from two sources. One is that definitely, I know, as I mentioned, this experience becomes very different. And of course, in the raw case, it takes more effort, but at the same time, I feel like it's more rewarding. And then you kind of get used to the idea of exploring and being open-minded about looking at different sources of information to come to a decision. On the other hand, because these raw cases have been developed at Yale, I think a lot of these cases also had that balance of business and society. So a lot of these cases were on topics that were both business relevant and society relevant. Like, for example, one of the cases there was about this art gallery that operates in New Haven that's been working for the past few years in one of the neighborhoods that is not so well to do. And so it was about, on the business side, it was about how do you sustain this art gallery and earn revenue without gentrifying the entire neighborhood, which is like displacing the people who are already there. And at the same time, you're also thinking about the social implications of it. How does this art gallery benefit the people who are there? How does it help in the upliftment of the people of New Haven? So this is the kind of balance, like it represents the what I talked about, business and society. It's really represented in the topics that the raw cases highlight. Both of these things will like lead to that the experience of going through a raw case very different from the other regular cases.
Okay, that's very cool. So what I'm hearing is that SOM is definitely preparing students for real world situations and also be leaders in business and society. So
Definitely.
that's really amazing. Vibhu, just if you reflect back to the time when you got to Yale, what surprised you when, in maybe your first couple weeks or so?
What surprised me? That's an interesting question. You hear about classrooms being diverse when you're applying, but the moment you get there and like the first week of orientation, you meet everybody and you realize the backgrounds, like both in terms of where people are from, what kind of backgrounds they come from, what have they been doing professionally, what their personal hobbies are. It's just mind-boggling. It's just, that I think not just Yale, but like business school in general, I think this is something that holds true, that the diversity of people that you will meet once you're here in the first couple of weeks, it's just mind boggling. You suddenly realize that, most of your life, you kind of live in a silo, and then you suddenly see that, okay, there are these many things you can do. And you will be glad that now you will end up after 2 years with this group of hundreds of friends who are going to do completely amazing and very different things from you. And from day one up to now, I continue to be amazed as to like the variety of experiences that our class represents.
Okay, super. What's something you wish you knew or did earlier, that is, before you got to Yale?
Oh, that's a great question. I think this was from like my personal recruiting experience. I would say it's a great idea to get a very clear sense of your career goals before you start at school. Why I say this is because, like, for example, personally, I was also kind of in two minds about split between consulting and tech, about which path do I want to take. It was both about my thoughts from before joining business school combined with, as I learned about both of these opportunities over time, and finally I chose tech for my internship. I think having a sense of clarity about the direction that you want to take before you start is a good idea, because once you're here, there are a lot of factors at play. You're going to start interacting with recruiters and, your fellow peers and second years who've already gone through recruiting. And you will be probably overwhelmed with a lot of information. So if you have not made up your mind a little, at least, to some extent, like 70-80% about what you want to do, you will end up coming to business school. And then you will see that there are like 15 recruiting options and you will be very overwhelmed with the number of choices available. So I think something pre-MBA during that summer, the most, I think, important thing to do is relax and then think about like which career path is something that you want to specifically focus on, because I think that really helps you save time and energy, especially in the first couple of months. If you're very, very clear that you want to be a consultant after like your MBA, once you're here, you can immediately, just focus on talking to the right people and targeting the firms that aligned with the goals that you're looking for.
Switching gears to student life a little bit, if you could talk about where you live and what
Mhm.
percentage of students live on campus versus do people live off campus?
So at Yale, first of all, we are located in New Haven, which is a tiny town. I mean, all of it is walkable. So nothing is more than a 15-minute walk away, which is, I guess, great. Depending on your preference, it could be great. It could be really boring very quickly as well. But the good thing is that we are located a couple of hours both from New York and from Boston. So we are midway. Whenever we want to have a quick break to the big city, we can always just take a train and go to New York anytime. So definitely, I think down that front, the location's nice. Thinking about where we live, so I personally live very close to SOM. I'm literally just a 2-minute walk away, and the building that I live in is like almost 80% of the people in that building are all SOMers. So it's like living in a dorm all over again, but it's great. I mean, it's like you leave your house and you just walk into 5 or 6 SOMers all the time. And it's great to be so close to SOM because, especially during the winters, when you don't want to really spend a lot of time walking outside in the snow, I always was very happy that I just made it to class in 2 minutes. That was always a relief. In terms of living on campus, usually at Yale, graduate students do not live on campus in terms of like the campus housing itself. But Yale is kind of located at the very center of the city, and you have a lot of residential apartments and houses all around the campus, which are very close, so like within 5 or 10 minutes of a walk. So all of us kind of live very close to SOM. We usually walk to each other's places, hang out after class. The number of potlucks I've attended in the past year is just insane. So especially, with during fall semester, COVID was still like a bigger worry. So they were less like we had smaller gatherings, and we would usually meet up at somebody's place and then just bring food that we cooked for each other. Definitely, you end up having a very warm vibe where you're just, during the daytime, you're in class. During the evening, you're just hanging out with each other. And since everybody's in New Haven, it's a small town, you don't have anybody else to hang out with apart from the SO members, which kind of it makes a really strong community because you spend so much time with each other, which I think is very different from like attending business school in a big city. Like if you're in New York and you have spent time in New York before, for example, or you have friends in New York who've been living from before, then you would do your class in the day and then you just go out with your old friends in the evening. But that is something that never happens at SOM and in New Haven. But that also like creates a really strong community. And since we are also not a very big class, we are 350 people. I almost know everybody already by the end of my first year. So at least by name. So definitely it's great to have that kind of a small cohesive environment where we are all living together next to each other. And then we have these very few places that we go out to, but they're like New Haven's pizza is something that people talk about a lot. Whenever you just talk to any SOM, or the first thing they'll talk about is which is their favorite pizza place. And they're like, the people are going to start ranking Sally's and Pepe's and Modern and all of those pizza places. So that's something New Haven is really known for. And I think that's just it. Like it's a small bubble, but it's a really engaging bubble, I would say.
Very nice. If we come to academics, can you talk a little bit about some of the courses that you've really enjoyed in your first year and also some professors that have been your favorite?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of courses that were like really amazing for me were these are part of the organizational, like the integrated curriculum. So one was Operations Engine, which is basically an operations course, but also tries to incorporate other disciplines into it as well. So this was a course taught to us by Professor Leslie Meng, who is a fantastic professor. I think she won an award at the end of the year as the most she was voted as the best professor in the core curriculum by the students. So she did a great job at making the class very interactive and giving us situations where you would like to have to walk through, like it's a factory operating and you've got like resources and how would you, put them to best use to get to a production target and stuff like that. So it was really engaging to do that. In fact, one of the amazing things that we had in that course was something called the Little Field Simulation. There was this 3-week long exercise where all of us, like in groups of 3, were managing a factory, factory simulation, where we had to, decide how much raw material we need to order, how many workers do we need, how much output should we sell, what's the revenue and everything. And my team actually came second out of the class. I think 350 people, around 70 teams. We were number 2 in the end. And number 1 were my roommates, surprisingly. So my 2 of my roommates, they were the team number 1, and I was paired up with two other people. So we became the second team. And it was fantastic. Like those 2 weeks were like a complete festival. Everybody's talking about, there was a public leaderboard. So everyone knew where everyone's standing was and how they were performing. So everyone's trying to figure out what's the best way to generate more money. And, we're reaching out to each other. Wait, how did you make so much money so quickly and stuff like that? So I think that was a really engaging course. The other one that was my favorite was Competitor for sure. I think also because of personal interest, because I was interested in competitive strategy and wanted to learn more about it. So Competitor had a lot of good cases from a variety of industries about, how competitors, like how, whenever you make a decision in a business, there's always going to be a reaction from other players in the same market. So that course was heavy on economics, heavy on game theory, and a lot of discussion about strategy and management as well. So it was a great, the cases were amazing, and you get to learn a lot about how, businesses operate and how really you thrive in a competitive business environment. So I think these two were definitely highlights. I mean, a lot of those courses were amazing, but these two were definitely highlights. One more thing that I would love to talk about, which was technically a course, but I think was arguably the best experience I've had at SOM till now, is SOM has something called a global study requirement, where there are 3 or 4 options within it in which you have to take compulsory international component as part of getting your degree. And one of the options is something called an international experience trip, or an IE trip, where you have an option like to choose between 10 or 12 different countries where you can go on a trip with 15 to 20 of your classmates and spend your spring break learning about the country, visiting industries, and learning about the culture and like the politics, culture, and business in a specific country. So I chose to go to the IE trip to Israel, which was a mind-boggling experience for me. It was amazing. I was there in March earlier this year. And we spent the 2 weeks, first of all, exploring Israel itself, learning about the history and culture, the very complicated history of Israel over the past century, and of the Jewish religion over the past centuries. And beyond that, the reason why we were there as business students, though, was Israel has a thriving tech startup culture. And we really got an excellent opportunity to get a deep dive into it. We met CEOs of multiple startups who were operating in Israel across industries. We met.
Can you name some of them?
Yeah, sure. The industries that were represented include multiple food tech startups, basically lab-grown meat, plant-based meat, and things like that. I think one of them is called Future Food. Future Food is a lab-grown meat producer. And then we met companies who are working on the defense manufacturing side. So Israel has a really thriving defense industry, and that is we met with people from Elbit, which is one of the leading defense manufacturers in the world, and that was also a great experience. Then in the capital, Tel Aviv, we visited a government-run incubator where multiple early-stage startups are working on building new products. And a lot of these, and how these companies operate in Israel is because the local market is pretty small. They are getting a lot of resources and a lot of funding from the government and local local VCs. And they are launching these products primarily in the US market. So Israel has a really culturally has been very close to the US. And so the entrepreneurs are using the resources that they have there to kind of test and launch new products in the developed market, and specifically focusing on the US. And the US has been very receptive towards it. And that has created a really excellent partnership that has helped the tech environment to really thrive, especially in Tel Aviv and increasingly in also the capital, Jerusalem, which is surprising. Jerusalem is usually known for the whole connotation with religion and as a tourist place usually. But now it is increasingly becoming a thriving startup ecosystem as well. In fact, one of the largest VC firms in Israel, it's called JVP, Jerusalem Venture Partners. They are based in Jerusalem, and that's they started there because they wanted to set up an alternative to Tel Aviv as a place where startups can grow and receive funding and thrive. So all in all, in 2 weeks, we met so many business leaders and had a wonderful experience trying to understand the country and the businesses that are working there. And I think it helped me get a really great sense of where the tech industry is heading towards, because I mean, Israel is has the freshness of a new Silicon Valley. And that's why they are really, really diving into launching products that you wouldn't even think about right now. You would think that, okay, this should be far in the future, but this is happening right now. So I think definitely that is something that I'm glad that SOM offers that as an experience as well.
It sounds like a phenomenal experience, the trip that you had, Vibhu. Vibhu, I also want to talk about your involvement with different clubs, right? You have
Yeah.
such significant involvement, data analytics club, business and environment, as well as the Capella group, right? So can you talk to us about the activities of each of these clubs?
Sure. Yeah. So let me go over them one by one. First of all, I'll talk about the Business and the Environment Club because that's a pretty interesting and unique club at SOM. So the Business and the Environment Club is, as the name suggests, encourages people who are, either have an interest in sustainability and the environment, or also want to pursue careers in the environment space or the sustainability space, to really have a platform where they can come together and engage with each other. The Business and the Environment Club, first of all, acts as a bridge between the students of SOM and the Yale School of the Environment. So they have a corresponding club as well. And we kind of work together to organize events a lot of times. And we also engage closely with Yale Center for Business and the Environment, which is a sort of a think tank that has professors from both SOM and from the School of the Environment to come together and work on business cases that relate to sustainability, relate to climate change, and other related topics. In terms of the activities that the club does, we kind of have a career support team which works with the career development office or the CDO to look for sustainability opportunities, bring them and talk to alumni who are working in the space and connect students to alumni and industry professionals. And on the other hand, on like the more community and social side, one thing that I really enjoyed being a part of multiple times was we have something called a forest side chat instead of a fireside chat, where we would decide on a specific topic and ask people to read about it, do a pre-read, and then come for a dinner somewhere in a restaurant in New Haven and just sit for a couple of hours and talk about that specific topic. This could be, we had a forest site chat like on COP26, which was the summit that happened in late 2021. Otherwise, we would talk about, let's say if you want to talk about water, like just that could be the topic, like water supply and challenges in availability of water quality to people. So that would be a topic of a forest site chat, and we would have this like almost on a bi-weekly basis. So it was something that really made a really strong community of people at SOM who are interested in this space to come together and always engage with each other. So I was specifically working on the communications team. So my work was basically to promote the club among the students as well as to alumni and the external audience. And also I worked with the School of the Environment to promote events and get them marketed sufficiently to the entire university as well. So that's about that club. Then the second one is that I'm a part of is the Data Analytics Club, which is also a really interesting initiative. So data analytics, data analytics skills are something that are in great demand across industries, not just tech, but even like in consulting and finance and marketing and almost every industry, to be clear on that. So what the Data Analytics Club primarily does is provide a platform to support people who are either interested in the space or who want to learn and acquire skills in the field of data analytics. So one of the biggest, most important activities that we do is we have a year-long curriculum where we have weekly sessions to teach specific skills to students who are interested to learn. So things like Excel, we start with Excel, then we teach SQL, Python, R, Tableau, and so on. So we have these sessions week over week, starting in the fall semester throughout spring. And people use it as a resource to even when they're preparing for consulting recruiting or tech recruiting and they want to brush up their Excel skills or brush up their SQL and Python skills to, either showcase on the resume or just to be prepared for their internship. So we are able to provide that platform. So we ask people who teach are also students who are have a lot of experience, who are experts. So we encourage them to be a part of our team and teach other fellow students who are looking to acquire these skills. Beyond that, we also organize speaker series events with leaders from the tech industry. And I think one thing that we do want to do though this year is also have an event where we can ask people who are not from the tech industry, like from places you wouldn't expect tech to be such a big thing. We want leaders from those industries to come and speak to SOM students about how data analytics plays a big role in their work. So that basically what we're trying to do is encourage the people who are already interested in the space, but also give a platform to those who may not, who are still thinking about whether data analytics is important or not in the career path that they're taking. So that's definitely it. So apart from these two, like professional plus social clubs, the third one, which I am which has been a lot of fun, is Economies of Scale, which is SOM's a cappella group. We come together on a weekly basis. Like it used to be every Sunday, but this year we might change that, like to some other day of the week. We would come in and practice songs for an hour and a half and do rehearsals. And we set up at least like 3 to 4 shows a year. With COVID, it was a little more challenging because we couldn't do large gatherings and there were not as many events. So we were not able to perform as much. But this year is probably going to be a step up. We perform on many multiple major events. They had something like, so one of the first performances was in something called the SOM Winter Stroll that happened in November. That was it was a kind of a gathering and a party in the SOM courtyard in the evening, and then we put up a singing performance there. So this is like just a place for singers and musicians to come together and just sing their favorite songs and just do some rehearsals, get their throats warmed up. And I think all of us find it as a great way to de-stress and disconnect ourselves from the usual rush of business school and recruiting and academics and everything. So it's just a great outlet for us to come together and put up a show.
These activities sound amazing, really, really cool. I still can't imagine how you manage everything.
It's a busy life.
Yeah, I mean, clearly. How much are you sleeping on average?
No, I think sleep is something I manage. I think I need to get better on like exercise and food. That's what I'm missing out. There's always something you miss out on.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. All right. So I want to make sure we also capture careers and recruiting, right? That's
Absolutely.
super important as well.
The gold stuff.
Yeah. Tell us about your internship search. Was it through on-campus process? And what actions were you taking? How did you go about your process?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, I was looking at both consulting and tech as possible spaces where I want to work on. And I think the first step is really as soon as you come in is networking and coffee chats. That is basically like most of fall semester really goes into that. So as soon as you come in, the first thing that you do is reach out to second years who have already just come back from their internships and hear from them about their experiences, about how you should talk to employers and what the interview process will look like. How did they prepare for their own recruiting experiences? Up to like late September, if you're starting in August, up to late September is kind of that phase where you're just like getting to know your own classmates and getting to know the second years and just hearing from their experiences without spending too much time engaging with employers. Engagement with employers starts ramping up in October, especially for consulting. It's slightly like the timelines are slightly different for different industries. For example, investment banking starts pretty early, whereas tech is a little later. And then, other industries like marketing and energy and all, they start like pretty much like into the spring semester. So my experience was I started having coffee chats with employers in around October, both from the consulting and the tech space. I was working on, again, I mean, probably if you can manage these two, it's great, but I would not recommend, splitting your time between these two big things all the time. It's good to prioritize and think about, what's the best path for you. I was having coffee chats with employers, people from like the target employers that I wanted to work with, whether it's from tech, like the big tech companies or major leading, tech firms, or on the other hand, with consulting firms as well. By around mid-October, both like the tech club and the consulting club start driving their case prep curriculum. So as I mentioned, you have these case interviews that are part of both consulting and tech interviews. Although they are structured slightly differently from each other. Tech's going to be much more focused on, tech-specific cases and will be a little more unstructured, whereas consulting case interviews are more, where you have to like follow a structured process, give a clear recommendation at the end, and have specific frameworks that you base your analysis on. So the consulting and the tech club, or all of the professional clubs, depending on what path you're taking, they provide you a lot of support during the fall semester. They will spend time with you. You're usually gonna have a large weekly session where everybody comes together and goes over the curriculum. So we're gonna discuss like one topic a week. For example, the first week would just be like opening an interview. What's going to be the first step? And that continues up to like, how do you give a solid recommendation? So there's going to be one session on recommendations, for example, in the end of the interview. And then we'll also be giving separate sessions on like behaviorals and how you should refine your answers for behavioral questions in the interview. Definitely a lot of support comes there. And that's really the busy part. Like October and November is like where you spend time with your classmates preparing for case interviews and behaviorals. And then you practice with your own classmates, you practice with second years. And by the winter break is when, the interviews really start rolling in. So you send in your applications usually in November, December. And over the winter break for consulting, it's over the winter break. For tech, it's a little later, like end of January or February up to March. You'll have interviews coming in for tech. As you go through the interviews can be structured very differently depending on where you're applying to. My specific experience with like Snapchat, where I'm at right now, I had like 2 rounds of interviews with 2 people who were on the team that I'm part of now. So I work on something called the growth team. And there was this, and the opening that I applied to was specifically for the growth team at Snap. So the growth team, we can talk about this in detail later, but it basically works with expanding the user base of Snapchat globally. So a lot of my interview was centered around talking about my past experience, working through a case that was actually connected to, work in growth, like how would you expand Snapchat's market in Nigeria? That was my question for one of the interviews, one of the case interviews. And I think what really helped me out on that front was, again, the alumni, because throughout this process, the people who are going to give you the most help are the alumni who are already working at these firms. So in my case, like at Snapchat, there was this alumni from the class of 2021. She was the one who gave me a referral for my interview at Snap. And the good thing about like alumni is that they reach out to, like, you reach out to them and they will almost certainly respond to you, and they're so happy to help you out and chat with you, help you learn more about the company, help you more about their job. And then even like during the interview process, the person who referred to me, she was in touch with me throughout the interview process, telling me about updates. Okay, like your first interview went well, so keep your hopes up, and let me know if there's any other information that I can pass on that would help. So it's definitely, I think, the alumni are a great resource during recruiting, and like the sooner you reach out to them and make really good connections with them, they will be very, very happy to champion your cause. Because all of us, like, I can imagine even myself, once wherever I'm working full time, I'm gonna try and promote SOM as much as possible, and that's what every alumni, the entire alumni base wants to do. So they're really helpful. I think during the entire recruiting process, if I would reach out to 10 alumni, 8 would respond like within the next day. So it's like, so the SOM alumni community, although it is relatively smaller because, we're a younger school, it's not been as long since Yale SOM has had an MBA program, but at the same time, it's very, very close knit, and people are very responsive. I mean, they reach out. If you reach out to alumni, they will be very happy to chat at any time, and they'll be willing to help you out and really continue the sense of community even as you step ahead of business school as well. So definitely, yeah, the recruiting process is long. There are going to be ups and downs. You'll feel like some of your coffee chats went really well, some did not go as well. Your conversations will be very different. Your interviews will be very different. So just need to be patient. I think in the end, it does work out. For sure. I mean, people will tell you that during your first year as well, and you will sometimes not believe it, but then in the end it did. It's challenging, but I think the important thing is to stay calm, be patient, and be focused. I think most important thing is to just not let yourself be bogged down by the recruiting process, because it is long. It lasts months, and you have to work your way through a lot of things. But definitely in the end, it's a worthwhile experience, and it ends well for everybody. You're in an amazing school, so you don't need to worry about the end result.
Great, great. And you said it lasts long. So when did you have your offer from Snap?
I got my offer in March. So
Okay.
So I was like, it was October to March, and tech recruiting is like pretty low. Like it's really drawn out because you apply. I applied in February, got my interview like a couple of weeks after that, got my result a couple of weeks after my interview. So tech's a little longer. Usually consulting doesn't take as long. Consulting, like you give your interview and by the end of the day, you have your result. But tech works a little slowly. So it's again, depending on where you're applying, the timelines look very different. And I think once you're here, you get a better sense of what the timelines will exactly be like.
Yeah, fair. What tech companies recruit international students at Yale? Like, I imagine big tech, the FANG companies, probably.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then,
FANG's definitely strong. I think Amazon is a really big employer. So I think a lot of our people who went to tech, like Amazon has a huge class of interns. So that's, I think, almost half the people who were recruiting for tech are in Amazon right now. Google is also a very major recruiter at SOM. So a lot of people went to Google. Snap has been consistently recruiting for the past 3 years. So that's been great. So, I mean, tech is a space where SOM is not completely entrenched yet, but like slowly breaking into all the firms. Like, for example, 3 to 4 years ago, SOM barely had a presence in either at Snap or in Facebook, like Meta now, or in Microsoft as well. But now, like over the past 3 or 4 years, people have stepped in. And now, since we have that momentum going with us, now more and more people are getting recruited and joining every year. But for, at Amazon and Google, I think definitely we have a big, like we've had a strong relationship. Even like the career development office has a very strong relationship with them, and they are routinely recruiting on campus. Beyond that, although in the tech space, I know people, internationals who like went all across. One of my friends is interning at Electronic Arts, the game developer EA. Then I think people are all across. Even within Amazon, people are like in operations, in product management, in very different kind of spaces, in AWS, Alexa, and so on and so forth. So there is a diversity of opportunities. And even if someone is interested in, not working for big tech and want to work with smaller startups, that is definitely also an option available for internationals as well. I knew there were a few firms. So here, I think common people, like common recruiters who would recruit internationals include, places like TikTok, then Nvidia, Salesforce. A lot of these big names are definitely here, and they have a good relationship with SOM. So there's no dearth of opportunity. And I think tech especially is a pretty friendly industry for internationals. There's not much to worry about in this space.
And you talked about the smaller employers as well, right? So if let's say somebody wanted to recruit in, say, health tech, then is that something that they could approach?
Definitely. I think we do. In fact, health tech now, as you mentioned, health tech, that is, we do have alumni who are working in the health tech space. So as I mentioned, the alumni are always so ready to help that once you reach out to them, I think they will make, sometimes I've heard people who made efforts, even if they were internationals, to kind of make a case for themselves and get through as well, especially for the internship search. And because we have such a diverse class and people coming from a very different, experiences, backgrounds. So you have people who are going into health tech, people who are going to tech for, sustainability. We have a lot of people who are going to sustainability tech, and these are spaces where, SOMers are going every year. And so you can reach out to alumni and they will always be ready to help out. So I think especially the recent alumni who have graduated in the past 4 or 5 years, they've been very helpful to the community, and they are going into increasingly more and more diverse spaces. And I think that's really and that's a trend in the right direction. So we have a lot of momentum going with us right now. So I think it's definitely a good time to be thinking about recruiting for these spaces at SOM as well.
Okay. Vibhu, can you tell us a little bit about your internship? Like, what does your day look like, and what skills do you need in your job?
Sure, sure. So currently I am working, as I mentioned, on the growth team at Snapchat. So the growth team's responsibility it has ownership of Snapchat's engagement and daily active users. That is the main metric that we work with. So, Snapchat is a platform that has a lot of adoption among the 18 to 24-year-old demographic in North America and across the world. In fact, India is one of the largest markets right now. So I've been of great help to the team right now because I know a lot of things about India, and that's been really helpful to them. But specifically, what I am working on, I am working with a couple of sub teams within growth. The first one is the strategy and analytics team. So what they do is they work on forecasting models for daily active users to make, we want to have an idea about how the user base growth will look like over the next, let's say, a couple of quarters or a couple of years. And so we work on those models and also make decisions about, if we expect the user base to grow by like 20 million, then what are the steps that we need to take? How should we set our goals accordingly based on our forecast? So we help the CEO and the exec team decide, set up goals, like annual goals, and decide upon how they should target growth campaigns in different markets. So there, I think this is like a mix of a business and technical role. So here, along with a sense of understanding how the user base is kept engaged in various different markets, you need to have a good sense of international markets. Like Snapchat's doing well in India, in Spain and Mexico, in Pakistan, in North America. So you need to have a sense of what's culturally and business wise what makes sense, especially in the space of social media to work in. And along with that, I'm also using like Python and SQL on a regular basis because we're working with these models and a lot of data. So I think you definitely need to have a good understanding of data visualization and how you work with multiple data sets and some knowledge of Python and SQL, although not very advanced, but like a basic level of Python and SQL is definitely nice to have in this role. On the other hand, I also work and my role, I'm also working on a couple of projects on new user acquisition. So basically, how does Snapchat encourage new users to come on the platform? So this includes, having ads about Snapchat being displayed. Like if you're doing a Google search and, about something some content, and then a Snapchat link shows up, that is something that we look at. How do we promote that? And also how Snapchat appears on the Play Store and the App Store. So, what the ratings look like, how many people are actually installing the app after viewing it on the App Store, like the conversion metrics and stuff like that. So that analysis is also something that I'm working on over the summer. So it's an exciting space. I think it's good to have an alternative perspective compared to the dominance that Facebook and Meta and Google have in the internet and social media space. So Snapchat is something that's trying to create a niche for itself, and it is investing a lot in augmented reality, which is basically you put your camera up and you superimpose virtual things on the real world. So like, for example, one of Snapchat's products is spectacles. Like you just wear a spectacle and you see things, effects and information superimposed on the real world in front of you. So that is something that Snapchat is doubling down on, and that's a big part of the growth story that we are also working with. So since our team works closely with multiple product managers in terms of, when they are releasing new products, how does it tie in with the growth story? What's the impact that these new products are having? We are the ones who kind of monitor that. We are the ones who flag when something goes wrong. If there's a big engagement drop in a particular country, my team will be the first one to know, and they will be the one who will be telling the CEO and everybody that we need to worry about India, something's going wrong there, or things like that. So definitely it's an experience. Like it's a great place to get a wonderful sense of Snapchat's business as a whole internationally, and to be really close to how like operations across multiple segments of the company is happening. And you also have a lot of visibility with the exec suite. So I have seen Evan work with my team a lot of times. Evan Spiegel, CEO. So I hear about him every day, chatting with my team about, what to be done next. Why is like this week, like this past week, we were investigating about like new users in India. And then I was, helping them understand, like when does the summer break start and end in India and things like that. So it was great to be able to give that cultural context while also being able to give an understanding of the data that we are looking at and making analysis about what should be the next steps to be done.
Amazing. Thank you. This is really insightful, Vibhu. Vibhu, what advice do you have for people who are interested in working in tech post MBA, but they have non technical backgrounds, such as, say, management or humanities undergraduate?
No, of course. That's a pretty common question. And I think the great thing is that I saw this story. Like I have seen many people who were from these like non-technical backgrounds go into tech successfully at SOM. So I think what tech companies are really looking for is aptitude. And I think demonstrating that you have, even though you have not been like working with data the entire time, but demonstrating an aptitude that you are technical, that like not technical, but you are analytical, you can make decisions by looking at data. I think those skills are good to highlight. Of course, as I mentioned, it's good to show an interest by taking electives or using the resources that are available at business school to brush up on some basic skills of SQL and Python. So once you're in business school, you don't need to be a data scientist. Like you don't need to have very advanced proficiency in these skills, but some knowledge is definitely helpful. And on that front, definitely the things like my own data analytics club, the curriculum that we run is kind of the reason it exists is to help people who don't have a technical background to be able to break into tech and roles where these skills are required. So that's one thing for sure. And also, I think what some people don't realize often, is that tech is not just about being a product manager or the roles are not limited to just roles where you're working with data or technology. Within tech, there are a wide variety of roles available for MBAs. I know people who interviewed for finance roles. I know people who interviewed for operations roles, and even for other things like marketing. So in terms of like depending on where your interest lies, so tech is a pretty big space. And you don't have to be like a very super technical Python, like an expert in Python or SQL or something to be working in the industry. And the good thing about why people can think about going into these different roles, even if you have long-term ambitions for being in like let's say being a product manager, is that once you're into tech and once you've like joined a tech firm, it's very easy to switch teams within a tech firm once you're in like a couple of years in. So you can, even if you are from a humanities background, for example, and you make it, let's say you join as a project manager at Amazon. So a project manager is going to deal more with operations and people management. But then if you really want to break into product, you can still spend your time at Amazon to learn, to refine, hone your skills, talk to product managers at the company, show your interest to the right people within the firm. And then you can make a transition within a couple of years. So making these transitions, switching teams is something that people in tech do all the time. And I think what's important is really just getting your first step in, and after that you can kind of work your way through what you really want to do.
Very helpful. And all those roles that you mentioned, Vibhu, those are also open for international students?
Yeah. So these are all, they like usually most of these roles will not be restricted to like there will be no employment restrictions on that. Most of the roles are open to, I know people who interviewed for various roles. Like actually, in fact, what happens in some of these firms, like for example, Amazon and Google, are that they do not ask you to apply to a specific role. They just like ask you to submit your resume, and then they, looking at your resume, match you to the role that they think will be the best fit for you. So I think that kind of also works well for people. And since you're not restricting anybody from applying at that stage, you kind of like Google and Amazon want to like evaluate what would be the best role fit for you. And they're flexible to like find a match with what the skills and experience that you're bringing. And then of course, as I mentioned, once you're in, you can easily like, think about in the short term, making a switch, talking to other teams. In fact, that is something that is encouraged even at Snap right now. Even though I'm working on the growth team, my team has encouraged me to reach out to other teams. And even when we're like talking about full-time offers and stuff, they are still open to talk about whether if you have an interest in some other space or other team that you want to work on, let us know and we will make your case for the other team instead of us if it comes to that. So I think that flexibility is something that the tech industry really does well. As I mentioned, tech is really friendly to internationals, so it should not be a big challenge.
Very helpful. Just as we're going to wrap up, just a couple more things, for you as you're going to enter your second year, what is it that you're really looking forward to?
Sure. I think what I'm really looking forward to now is I think the fact that you spend your second year mostly with electives academically is something that I'm really excited about, because SOM, the core curriculum kind of takes up most of your time in the first year. There is room to take a couple of electives in the first year, but that's like just overburdening yourself, I guess, in my opinion, but others may disagree. But I think I'm excited to really now get to spend more time with electives and doing courses in other graduate schools at Yale. I think something I'm really excited about is definitely I do want to take a law course, because first of all, I had this latent interest of doing at least a little bit of a dive in law since I was in undergrad. And Yale Law School is like the top name. Like Harvard and Yale are the two top names in law. So I think I know people like who go to do a law course, like the second years who were doing courses in law last year. They were like tourists when they were there. They would take photos of the classroom all the time and share their experiences of the class on Instagram all the time. It's like just it's just a very exciting experience. So I think that's something I'm looking forward to. Beyond that, I think it's gonna be good to like have a different pace in recruiting. So we like full-time recruiting for second year wraps up a little earlier. So usually like by the mid of fall semester. So I would love to spend more time meeting a new class of people, working on, club leadership and things, and orienting myself through a different perspective of business school, as to like less of being the one recruiting and being the one, exploring, to being the someone who's guiding other people to find their best path. That is something I'm looking forward to do. And finally, of course, lots more singing. I'm really excited to lead economies of scale next year. So that is something we want to definitely set up more shows this year, because, COVID, hopefully COVID continues to be less and less of a factor over time. So we would love to put up many more performances and just have a great time.
Wonderful. Just to conclude our interview, if you could just talk about how can prospective students be better prepared to hit the ground running when they arrive at Yale?
Sure. The best thing to do now, I think, first of all, is take rest. I mean, school at the moment school will start, it's going to be a complete rush, and you're going to spend 12 hours a day doing something or the other. So I think the most important thing to do is over the summer, definitely rest and relax, because you don't want to be burned out later in the year. So definitely build up your energy, connect with your friends and family, especially if you're traveling. If you're moving to the US for business school, the distance is something that you start missing home very quickly once you're here. And you always half the world away, and the time zone always is a thing. So definitely that is something to be prepared for. In terms of being prepared for school, I'd say put real thought into what your career goals are and what you really want to do. Of course, the application process and the essays do help you get a sense of, you have some stated goals that you put in the application, but this is an opportunity for you to again think about it, talk to the people. You can start reaching out to current students who are doing their internships in multiple disciplines and multiple areas, and you can start thinking about what interests you. Because honestly, once you're in business, once you're coming to SOM or any top business school, you really don't need to restrict yourself about following a herd or playing it safe. You can really pursue whatever you want to. You can be very honest about your career goals, very honest about your ambitions. Once you have that sense of clarity, then recruiting becomes much more easier, because you feel like talking about your story much more confidently. You realize that what you're doing, you feel a sense of passion towards what you're doing, and everything becomes much more easier once you have that sense of clarity. So definitely, I think reflecting upon your career goals is something that you should do. And yes, relaxing and connecting with friends and family. That's all.
Very helpful. So, with that, Vibhu, we'll bring our episode to a close. I really, really, really want to thank you for sharing such a wealth of information and things, honestly, that I've never heard in other places. The kind hearted Yali, that's really going to stand out for sure. Thank you so much. This is really helpful for prospective students.
Of course, Nupur. Thank you so much for this. It was great to be able to share my experiences with you and prospective students. I hope that whatever I've shared now will be a great resource for them to be able to make the decision about whether SOM would be a good fit for them or not. And thank you so much. It was great to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, likewise. Have a great day.
You too.